welcome to RealTime Labs. I'm Marjorie Peet, consulting physician, bringing you some short videos to help you understand your mycotoxin test results. This is the second in a series, and you will want to watch video 1 to understand what do these results mean. This question today is, does everyone have this amount, and where did I get these from? So we'll look at those questions. Okay, so does everyone have this amount of mold toxins in the body? We talked a little bit before about the fact that we're looking at just mold toxins specifically in the body, not allergies, infections, or mold in your body. So no, it's not normal to have these mold toxins in your body. That's why the test has no normal range. We don't have a range from normal to abnormal. Only some molds make mold toxins. The molds that make mold toxins are feeding on dead materials. They're called saprophytes. So that means they're rot by definition. So there's no normal amount of rot toxins to have in your body. If you were walking outside in the forest where there's some normal decay happening, it's diluted much more than in an enclosed building, and it's a briefer exposure. You wouldn't be camping and laying down night after night by a rotting log because you would notice and think, probably not a good idea. However, if it's behind your wall, it's a little harder to avoid. Did I get these results from food? Are these numbers on my test showing that I have mold exposure from food? So there can be some molds in some foods. It is something to be aware of. You could get a bad batch of corn and maybe have some zearalenone, or if you're an absolute peanut butter fanatic, you might get some aflatoxins because those peanuts tend to sit on the ground and can accumulate a little bit of mold. But what I haven't yet seen, and I've looked at least a good 200 of these test results, is someone who has zearalenone or just has aflatoxin. What I see is that if someone has chronic mold exposure, they have 3, 4, 5 of these results. And in fact, aflatoxin and zearalenone tend to be slightly lower than the other 3. So just naturally, the quantity or frequency of those are just a little bit less. Mold in the food supply has been very well studied. If you start Googling and looking for information on these different mold toxins, most of what you find is going to be related to agriculture. And we have food storage and handling procedures that are designed to minimize mold. We have some amount of testing. I wouldn't count on every batch of my food being tested, and yet most of us aren't getting sick really often. Compared to a few places in a few countries, we have fairly low risk of that. And it's just not the pattern that we see on the test results. So again, did I get these from outdoors? If you were outdoors, you would usually not be spending as much time just in one specific place where there's a particularly elevated amount of toxins. So you wouldn't be accumulating them. Yes, you're exposed to mold toxins outdoors. You could accumulate a little bit, might be harder for us to detect those very low levels. In a building with water damage, you're spending long periods of time enclosed, and modern buildings are more airtight, so you're more enclosed with these toxins building up an accumulation. What we're measuring on this test is not every mold toxin or level in your body. We're seeing what your body is excreting into the urine, and you have mechanisms your body uses to move things into the urine. And so we only see kind of roughly a given amount in a day of these. So look at the third row, trichothecenes. Those come from Stachybotrys. Now, specifically the macrocyclic trichothecenes that we look for. If you go looking for information about trichothecenes, they can come from foods, but not the macrocyclic. The macrocyclic come from Stachybotrys. That's the name of the organism. You can find that on page 3, and that's a building mold. It's one of the heaviest and stickiest, so it tends to be behind the wall, and it may not show up on air samples when you have an inspector who uses air samples. Nothing wrong with that, but you also want a dust swab looking for the mold and the mold toxins, because this one can be missed most easily. Does everyone have this amount? Again, so no, these are rot toxins, literally, so there's no normal amount in your body. And present means on this test that you've accumulated some of these over time. So if you went on vacation and spent a couple nights in a moldy hotel, your levels wouldn't really jump much on this kind of a test. And here's the trichothecene group, macrocyclic trichothecenes. So if you see those positive or present on your test, those come from Stachybotrys, and that's primarily a building mold. It loves to eat cellulose, such as drywall. Don't all buildings have mold? Unfortunately, many buildings have mold. The estimates are anywhere from 30-something to 60-something%. It's not normal or acceptable. It is something that we do need to have a much better system to prevent, detect moisture to prevent the growth of mold, detect early mold growth, and remediate quickly and early on so we can avoid big, expensive remediation projects. However, your lovely new building is not exempt from mold. I say that every building with pipes running through it and a ceiling, roof, especially a ceiling where you can't see the roof itself, and a basement or a crawl space is not exempt from mold. So newer building materials are great food for mold. If you want to avoid mold growth, keep moisture levels below 60%. There's a variation as to how much moisture and how much heat is in the air as to when mold growth can start to take hold. There's always little spores floating around a little bit here and there. They won't take hold and grow without being a certain amount of moisture and heat. So it's below 60% is safe. You can find a dehumidifier that will kick in at 50% and start removing moisture from the air. And mold is not always just old buildings with stinky basements, unfortunately. You want to make sure you stop any leaks immediately and have the damage repaired. So for some more quick answers, check out some more videos, and thanks for watching.